Wednesday's probably the quietest day of the week because this is, Monday for all intents and purposes for us.
So today is Wednesday. Yesterday was Tuesday, which is the Cherokee Scout release day.
Yes.
Yeah. And has Tuesday always been the day?
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, there was
Is Tuesday a day, is it purposeful?
if I remember correctly, once upon a time, Wednesday was considered like the key day for grocery stores.
Okay.
So I know so many grocery stores absolutely positively had to have their inserts in the paper on Wednesdays. So I know a lot of weekly newspapers that came out like Thursday or Friday ended up shifting to Wednesday because of that, which makes sense. I remember having to do some of that myself. It's why most daily newspapers have like a lifestyle section that has something to do with food.
Really?
On Wednesdays, yeah.
So grocery stores have all the sway. But you're not just over the Cherokee Scout.
No, I oversee the Cherokee Scout, the Graham Star out of Robbinsville, the Clay County Progress out of Hayesville, and then going into North Georgia, the Blue Ridge paper, the News Observer, and then in Ellijay, the Times Courier.
Okay.
So our company's has several different regions of multiple newspapers, and then a regional publisher over each one, and then we all report directly to the owners.
Okay.
So
what company is that?
Community Newspapers Incorporated.
Community Newspapers.
Yep, we're out of Athens, Georgia. 24 newspapers, all in the southeast, all in smaller rural areas. So we're not interested in going into metro areas and doing business. We very much prefer our small towns.
When did the Andrews Journal, when did it stop? That was what it was. It was the Journal, right?
It was the Andrews Journal, yep. Unfortunately, the last edition was 2018, was the last issue of the Journal.
Was that under?
Without question, that was the saddest moment of my career. Because even though the Journal had not been technically making money for more than a decade, it's still a flag. It's still very important to that community. There was a 50-year history of this newspaper, and you don't want to lose that. So we did our best to keep the features that were the most popular in the Journal and merged them into the Scout. And to this day, we've never missed an Andrews football game. We've never missed an Andrews Board of Aldermen meeting. We've got a staff correspondent out of Andrews, Nicole Wright, who's covering pretty much every event that is put on in the town. So just because the Journal doesn't exist doesn't mean we've forgotten about it.
Yeah.
It unfortunately, at a certain point when you're not making money, you gotta make a different decision.
So it sounds like it was a financial decision. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And it was under the Community Newspapers Incorporated?
Yep, it was my baby. For years, I probably shouldn't admit this, but for years I had workers at the Scout work at the Andrews Journal without technically billing the Journal because I didn't want it to show up that they were losing money.
I gotcha.
So it was, the move probably should have happened years before, and certainly if we hadn't done it when we did, COVID would have been the death knell in 2020. That was such a hard year for every newspaper, but even the ones that are very successful, but the ones on the margins like that, it would have been impossible to keep going.
Yeah, I didn't even think about COVID effect on newspapers. What does that look like? What did that look like?
Well, it's pretty crazy when you've got to worry about businesses that are what was the phrase they used? Essential.
Essential,
versus businesses that aren't essential. Because I'm pretty sure every business is mighty essential to the people who run it.
Oh, yeah.
So to tell them not to be in business for a while was crazy. And of course, the news was coming so fast and furious at the beginning. We went, let me see if I remember this correctly, 73 consecutive weeks with a story about COVID on our front page.
73?
73. And even after that, it was still in the paper for a while more. But it was just so prevalent. There's really never been anything like that in my career where every week you had to update it because there was more questions than there were answers.
Okay. So this was, the material that you covered was You know, it was new material coming down from, what would it be? Who was supplying all the COVID information?
Well, I'll tell
Like
you,
the FDA and...
yeah, but David Badger and the Cherokee County Health Department
Yeah.
did a fantastic job. I mean, David was very quick with information when we needed it. And not only that, he was quick to make changes when the vaccines came out, and the way they organized it where people could come through without even leaving their vehicles and things like that. I mean, it just was, for a small town health department to pull that off, they deserve a lot of kudos. And I think because of that, we were able to keep the pandemic a little bit more manageable in our area.
Yeah, I remember when they set up that garage cover, and they just had basically drive-through testing.
Yes, which it's wild to think of that now, and let's hope we don't have to think about it again.
Yeah, that was a crazy time. I feel like a lot of people have kind of moved on. I feel like I've moved on mentally for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think about it. So when you mentioned it affecting the newspaper, I was curious as to how that looked.
Yeah, I've seen some studies that show the impact it had on children who were not able to get with their classes and all for such a long time. And there certainly was an impact there. But I'm glad to say that we've gotten a little bit better at managing the things that have happened since then. And so nothing will hopefully come up like that again.
I have a son, let's see, in 2020, he would have been in second or third grade. So it definitely was a challenge to try to do the schoolwork with him, try to work, try to watch him every day.
Makes you appreciate teachers, don't it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Appreciate teachers. So I know you talked about the old building and the new building. We're sitting in the new building.
We are.
Which is downtown Murphy, basically. And it's near the old building.
Right next door.
When did that swap happen?
Well, trying to remember, once upon a time, we were in the building that's right behind Civic Credit Union in time now.
Okay.
Darrell Brown used that as his office for a while. We just had a little office there, so we didn't have a press plan or anything. And around 1962, we moved next door, which is on South Church Street.
Yeah.
And that's when we were able to actually have our own press brought here and the whole 9 yards. So
I remember that.
you remember, it went from 2 units to 7 over the years, and we had 2 extensions onto the building. But as the 2000s came in, we had multiple mail bags that were being used to plug holes in the walls because the rust of the old metal building had just started to take over. And the roof is leaking, and as you can imagine, printing a newspaper, 1 drop of water is a disaster.
I'm sure.
So actual rainfall would be a complete disaster. So we knew we had to do something different. And that's when we started working on this building, which was around 2006. And then we moved in 2008.
Okay.
So it's still the new building, even though it's 17 years old. So.
Still, yeah. That decision to stop printing here in town, how was that received?
Wasn't received well by me.
No?
It's simply because it was a point of pride.
Yeah.
You know, we had a very good press room filled with excellent workers who did a fine job. I'll just tell you, like when there was an election day here, they would come in at 4 in the morning because we'd be up till midnight, 1, 2 a.m. finishing the paper for the results. And we have to be at the post office by 6:30 on Wednesdays in order to be in the mail that day.
Okay.
So we had just that 2.5-hour window for them to come in, print the newspaper, and get the first copies to the post office.
That's a hectic day.
It is. And then around 8 o'clock, Main Street would come in and bring breakfast.
Wow.
But those folks were fantastic. I mean, we never had any complaints. They knew what we had to do, and they did it. If we ever needed anything improved, they were so good to work with. We print at one of our sister press plants now in Franklin.
Okay.
And they're good folks over there too, but it's not quite the same as having Jimmy in the back.
Yeah.
So.
How many did it employ in the back when you were printing?
Well, we had 4 people on the press and 8 people who did inserts. And that could fluctuate based on the season, right? There'd be a lot more heavier insert load in the summer, so we might pick up a worker or 2. Of course, that's one of those things with newspapers that is not as prevalent as it used to be, right? Because so many people are using a digital means to release it. So you don't have as many of those inserts. But like when our friends at one of our local businesses quit doing it for a while, there were so many calls from local residents wanting it back that they brought it back.
Yeah.
So we're still a far cry from 100% digital in Cherokee County.
So when you say inserts, I'm thinking Ingles,
Yeah.
Dollar General, what is it, Save a Lot.
Yeah, Walmart,
Yeah.
Walgreens. And of course, in the old days, newspapers would have TV guides and big comic sections and things like that. And that's, by the time you get it, it's old news in many respects. Same reason like we don't have a weather forecast in the Scout. Well, by the time people will receive it in the mail on Wednesday,
Yeah.
the weather's moved on.
It's old news.
We've got the app on our phone. We see it every day. We see it says it's going to rain, it storm at 5, and then it doesn't. So
Yeah.
just like clockwork.
But I guess I'd like to back up a little bit. You're not a Murphy native,
Nope.
right? Where are you from?
I was fortunate to move here in the summer of '81.
Okay.
My family grew up in West Palm Beach, Florida. My grandma was from Kentucky, so she's a very southern girl, and my grandfather's family is from Germany, and so they have that whole different, distinct culture. And my biological father's from Scotland, so it was a nice mix. West Palm Beach was a whole different place then, as anybody will tell you. We started thinking back in the '70s when I was first starting school.
Yeah.
Gosh, I remember in first grade, I walked like almost a full mile to get to the school along a road that was pretty busy. I couldn't have imagined doing, like one of my grandchildren today doing that. I mean, it would freak me out, just the thought of them walking that close to a road that's that busy. But it wasn't that way then. So it started to change in the '70s, and by the time the '80s turned around, we wanted to get out. And my mom, thankfully, once upon a time, we spent a summer in Asheville, and she met Sandy Blakemore and their family, and kept in touch with them over the years. And right around then, Sandy said, you know, we really need somebody at Blake Realty to come up here and work with us. And so they came up and visited, came home and said, guess what, we're moving to Murphy, North Carolina. So I got out a map and tried to hunt it down.
Yeah. How old were you in '81?
So that's when I was a sophomore in high school.
Sophomore.
So I was 15. At the time, I'm not going to lie, I was not happy. My school in South Florida had 2,500 students in a graduating class of 450.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I had a neighborhood with probably 12 kids my age within golf ball hitting distance. So the idea of leaving all that behind and coming to a school, at the time Murphy High had 700 students in grades 7 through 12.
Right.
Wasn't that excited. Quickly changed my mind.
What changed it?
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is I just felt so much more like I was seen.
Okay.
It's easy to disappear in a big school. You know, you can put as I did in one class, put my head on the desk and just slept away the year.
Yeah.
I tried doing that in Murphy, and they woke me up. They made me pay attention.
Yeah, I'm sure the teacher-to-student ratio is much smaller.
I tell you, the one thing that impressed me the most about Murphy is when I was in 10th grade in West Palm Beach, I took geometry class. Didn't get it right away. By the end of the first semester, I'd made a D. By the middle of the second semester, my head was on the desk, and when it was time for the midterm, I just didn't show up for it. Transferred to statistics the rest of the year, which, you know, I was a baseball guy, so I could do ERA and batting average, so that was easy. So we move up to Murphy, and they said, well, you need to take geometry because you've already passed algebra. And I'm going, oh, I've tried that. I'm not good at that. And don't you got something else? And they refused.
Yeah.
Absolutely refused. And I had Matt Rogers, who was then a rookie teacher. He ended up becoming a principal later in his career. And his first year teaching with the exact same book I had in West Palm. That year, I went to Cullowhee with the team from Murphy to compete in the state geometry contest.
Really?
I averaged a 97 for the year.
Wow.
Same book, first year teacher, whole different culture.
Yeah. Teacher
And
made the difference.
It made all the difference. And so,
Class size and teacher, I'm sure.
both.
Yeah.
And the fact the fellow students were so cool. I mean, there wasn't that it was cool not to do your schoolwork element in my class.
Yeah.
Where there was a little bit of that in South Florida. So I was glad to do that, and that's why I was glad to come back. So my daughters got to graduate from Murphy High, and this feels like home. This it definitely is home.
So when you moved up to your senior year, did you have college on your mind?
Absolutely. Back then, it was all about baseball. The saddest thing I heard was it was very hard to get a full ride baseball scholarship, and so when I learned that, it kind of broke my heart. Because even a half paying would be very difficult for me and my family to pull off. But that's, again, everybody in Murphy, when I would talk to, try to make an appointment with a counselor in South Florida, it might take you a week to get in. In Murphy, we'll come right in. Let's talk. It was that kind of atmosphere. And teachers, counselors, the principal, everybody was so engaged in wanting me to do my best and to have the best happen for me. And I won't forget that. I never have.
What about baseball? Why is baseball your sport?
Baseball I was a pitcher back then, and unfortunately I tore my rotator cuff right after my senior year. So I was still playing in semi-pro ball up until age 20. And it was one of those days where I threw a pitch and felt something in my shoulder. And every pitch I threw after that, my arm just felt like it was an appendage hanging on to my body. And that was it. So every time I play catch with my kids growing up, my arm would hurt like crazy.
So it's not something you ever got
I've never
looked at.
fixed. Yeah, it's probably got enough scar tissue in there too.
What about the game did you love?
Being a pitcher is the best part of baseball because nothing happens without you. Literally every eye is on you as each moment starts. And knowing the batter's waiting for you, knowing the little mind games you play between batters and hitters and people on base, he's trying to guess the exact pitch I'm throwing and where I'm throwing it, and I'm trying to guess what he's not looking for. So to me, baseball is just the perfect thinking person's sport. So today I must confess that I'm a huge fan of the UFC and mixed martial arts.
I saw that they had some coverage a couple of weeks ago in the Scout.
I have been on the official rankings panel since the rankings began 12 years ago.
Really?
And what I do then after every event with the UFC is I go in and rank the top 15 in each weight category. And there's 8 for men and then 4 for women, as well as pound for pound categories. So
this is your opinion ranking?
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm absolutely obsessive about it. So the research I do is, as my wife would say, far more than my volunteer position pays for. But I love the sport so much because these guys and women who are involved, it's just them. Baseball, you have a team. I've got a catcher, I've got a first baseman, I've got 9 hitters in the lineup or 10 with a DH. And so we all have to pull together. And that's something I think every child needs to learn growing up. But in MMA, you're on your own. The coach can say something to you, but he's not going to jump in the cage and save you. And there's something to be said for sports like that teach you that kind of individual, I have to rely on myself type thing. And because of my injuries over the years...
tennis would be a lot less violent.
Yes, yes. But because of my injuries over the years, I can't do martial arts like I would like. So... There's something I think about things you can't do that makes you want to do it that much more, right?
I have never gotten into UFC or MMA. I really have this. I hate to watch people fight.
I don't blame you. That's my daughter.
I don't know why, but it just does something to me. I feel bad for the person that's losing, and I just can't watch it. I don't know.
I don't blame you. There are times when. It gets a little rough.
And I know that they're both volunteering, it's a competition between them, but It just does something to me mentally. So you graduated here what year?
83.
83, and then?
Yeah, then I went back down to Florida after I learned about I couldn't get a full ride scholarship
baseball,
to play at Palm Beach Community College, which in the community college world, Palm Beach was a player. They often went for state championships. And that's when I developed my first arm problems, was that year. And so we didn't know it was the rotator cuff because that was still a relatively new injury back then. You know, geez, I mean, they just come up with the first Tommy John surgery not long before then. So all the arthroscopic surgery advances they've made in recent years, they probably could have done that for me 40 years ago, and my arm would have been good as new in a month.
Yeah.
But timing is everything.
Timing, yeah. Right-hand pitcher?
I complain all the time that I'm not left-handed because my mom's left-handed. And why she didn't give me that dream.
What do you stand to gain as a left-handed pitcher?
Lefties are so rare that you take a picture like Jesse Orozco, who's a reliever for the Mets once upon a time. He pitched until he was 46 years old. He was left-handed, and they would bring him in as a specialist to get a tough left-handed hitter out. And then typically that was it for him.
Yeah.
So, man, if you can have a 25-year career pitching to one or two guys a game, that sounds like a pretty good gig to me.
That is. I don't watch a lot of baseball. I enjoy it.
Yeah, when I was a senior, I wanted so bad to be drafted, and I moved around, and I didn't. But some left-handed kid got picked in the 5th round whose statistics were not even close to mine, and I've never forgotten that.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I met my first scout when I became a sports writer and chatted with him, and I said, so when you see a left-handed pitcher, what advantage does that person give? And he says, how much advantage can you give?
Yeah.
That big a difference because
Really?
they were so rare at the time.
So after the rotator cuff injury, what was your outlook then?
Well, thankfully, that's right about the time when I had started my first newspaper job. So I was 18 and I'm going to college and playing baseball, and I'm working at the night shift at the convenience store, and I think I've got the next several years planned out. And as things happen, I met a girl and she met me, and 12 months later we had a son. And so you start rethinking a few things after that. So I left college for a couple of years and started working. And when I was 19, I was driving a forklift in Atlanta at a place that put on the backs of trucks, like dump trucks, utility trucks, things like that. And,
Okay.
And I'm just driving and putting the little things on, just mindless sort of repetitive work. And I just kept thinking, wow, there's got to be a better way to make a living than this. And then one day on a lark, I just decided to go up to the Marietta Daily Journal and just say, hey, I didn't have any clips from when I was the editor of the Boomerang at Murphy High. I didn't have any clips for when I wrote for the newspaper at my school in South Florida. Didn't have any nice clothes. I just showed up. And as fate would have it, the Marietta Daily Journal owned a string of newspapers around Metro Atlanta called Neighbors. And they were always looking for reporters because they only paid minimum wage. So thankfully, I was that guy. So I took a pay cut from $5 an hour to $3.35 to become a journalist. And I can't remember a day of my first 6 months when I did not get down on my knees and pray, thanks to God, that I was not in a forklift, in the sun. I was using my brain. I was being creative. Writing to me is fun. It's not pressure. I don't look at a blank page and go, oh no. It's like, okay, that's a challenge.
Okay.
So to be able to do that as a teenager, to write for a living, and I practically lived at the library because I didn't know so much because I had barely gone to college at all. So every time I'd be writing about state politics in Georgia, I'd rush down the library and learn all I can about how the system worked and the whole process. And doing that gave me, part of my education on its own. So I say that a lot of times. The best reporters that I've found over the years are ones that don't necessarily graduate with honors from a big journalism school. They're the ones who just sort of find their way into it. And it clicks.
I'm sure that they have the passion for it if they...
Absolutely. And that makes all the difference in the world.
So you said that you wrote for your Florida school and for the Murphy school. So it's something that you've done for a long time.
Oh, my Lord. When I was 9, 10, I used to write little comic books about my friends, what I would make them superheroes. I remember a couple of them. One guy was the invisible head, and I remember that because it's the stupidest superhero ever. I mean, what advantage do you have by having an invisible head? But he
So the
thought it
rest
was
of his
great.
body was visible?
No, the rest of his body is visible, so it wasn't very advantageous. But I would do that for my friends. I'm playing football, and then that led into writing songs, which led me to recording them while drumming on boxes and Charlie Chip cans, which ultimately led me to actually playing the drums.
Okay.
And for the last 19 years, I've been playing with the praise band at Mountain View Church here in Murphy.
Mountain View.
So that's my passion. Mountain View is where the old Murphy Bible Church used to be, on the road right up by Monte Alban.
Okay. Yeah.
To the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, our church is merged, and we have 2 services on Sundays, and that is where I truly get my joy. When I'm playing music for the Lord and I'm feeling the positive energy from the folks there, it's such a positive, wonderful feeling. I can't imagine not having that refill every week.
So that's something. Okay. How long have you been playing with them?
Yeah, it was the first Sunday of 2006. I was with them, and that again was one of those things. I fall into most things in my life. I'm in the Rotary Club of Murphy, and a woman named Marie Spiegel joined. She was only a member for 3 months, but as I often did when new members joined, I'd go sit with them because I didn't want to be alone and things like that. And so we started talking, and she was telling me about this new church that formed, and she's telling me about it, and she's talking about the music, and I'm like, wow, that sounds like my kind of place. And then one day she goes, we've got a good band too, but we're just missing a drummer.
Oh. I'm sure your heart
say.
skipped a beat. Yeah.
It did, because I had had back surgery the year before, my second of 4 spinal surgeries. And when I started recovering, I went out and bought myself a little kit, because I'd sold my old kit years before, and I wanted to get back into doing something fun. So when he said that, and I just got the kit back, it was just a sign that this was meant to be. So it was. There are some things you just have to be grateful for and accept it. And we've totally switched out band members over the years. So I love being the guy who's got the history of all our different incarnations. And we were fortunate to release an album, Whisper to a Shout, 12 years ago.
Okay.
Which there's still some copies floating around here.
Whisper to a Shout.
Yep. Chris West, who's now the pastor at Shepherd of the Mountains, was our lead singer at the time.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, it's good. Got a bunch of original songs as well as a few covers on there.
So tangent. What is the Rotary Club?
What is the Rotary Club? Rotary clubs are an international civic organization. There's about 1.6 million members worldwide, I think, at last call. We're in countries, literally every industrialized country in the world. We do predominantly local projects, like the Rotary Club of Murphy. We do several fundraisers a year, and with that, we do scholarships for high school students. This year, for the first time, we did a program where we gave a toothbrush, toothpaste,
Floss.
floss, thank you,
Yeah.
as well as an instruction of how to use it to every student and faculty member in Cherokee County Schools. So we're just trying to do good things in the community.
So it's just kind of a community outreach.
Very much. We put in the first handicap swing at Conahita Park.
Okay.
Things like that. We recently planted a peace pole down behind the LNO depot, which is kind of neat because it's got English on one side, and then it's got the Cherokee language and Spanish, as well as the old Cherokee dialect on it, as just a reminder that we're all unified as one.
And the peace poles, I remember reading about that in the paper. That's a worldwide thing.
And one of the things we do worldwide that from here is, many years ago, our community lost a beautiful young girl named Nora Wells in an accident. And one of the things that she wanted to do so bad before she passed was to help build wells in Africa. So our club, through one of our members who was real close with Nora, have developed what's Wells for Nora.
Okay.
And we have now either fixed or put in so many wells that more than 300,000 people have access to water in multiple countries who didn't have it before.
Okay. I went to school with Nora. Yeah. I think it was Starks, right?
It was.
Yeah.
Yes.
You said Nora Wells.
Oh, you're right. Wells for Nora. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries. No worries. I just wanted to.
But yeah, my daughter was friends with her too, so I'm really glad that she's being honored in that way.
I forgot what I was going to say. No, I was curious, how did you go from your Metro paper to where you are now?
Well, I was in my first at the Neighbor there for about 8 months, and there was a daily newspaper in town called the Clayton News Daily, and they just called me one day out of the blue and said, "Hey, we got an opening, you interested?" And I went and talked with them, and since it was higher than minimum wage, it seemed like a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
So I worked there for another year, and that's when I ended up chatting with some folks from International Bible College in Florence, Alabama. They had come to talk with our church, and our church was offering scholarships for folks who wanted to go. And so thought about it, prayed about it, and I knew I wanted to go back to school anyway because, I hate leaving anything incomplete, and that was incomplete. So for the next 4.5 years, I was a student at IBC and lived in Florence. The only newspaper in Florence was the Times Daily, which was a daily newspaper, roughly the size of like Asheville.
Okay.
And they had, again, it was a good solid paper. It was owned by the New York Times Company, so it was a whole different mindset from the local paper. And the folks that I'd been working with thankfully wrote me a very nice reference letter, and they hired me in the perfect position, which was as a nighttime copy editor. So I could go to school during the day. Classes always ended by 3, and at 4 o'clock, I'd be clocking in at the paper.
So what is copy editing?
Copy editing at a daily paper would be everything gets channeled to you. So the copy editors would be in charge of all the layout and design of all the pages.
We're talking visually.
Visually.
Oh,
and they would also be responsible for the last edit of the actual stories. So somebody like the city editor or the news editor or the managing editor or the executive editor might have read the story before it gets to you. But since you're the last one, if there's a mistake in it, you're the one that's ultimately going to be held responsible. So as a little 20-year-old kid working for a New York Times quality newspaper, it was a great education because every mistake was treated like a serious one. They didn't let anything go by. I mean, just a misplaced subject-verb agreement. We talked about it and made sure we understood why we were going to do it the right way, which was great. I'm so glad that I worked with so many really good professional journalists who had strong ethics and integrity there. And so after I graduated from school, and we started looking at other options, as the paper there had a lot of long-term employees in place, and that's when I ended up in Wilmington, North Carolina as city editor and then sports editor, before going to Sebring, Florida as executive editor, and then Lake City, Florida as executive editor, and then back to Florence as executive editor, which brought me to 2003 in Murphy. The way I describe it is I've got 4 kids and they were born in 4 states. So that tells you all you need to know that I got around a little bit. But thankfully, the last 22 years, same house, man, it's a miracle.
Do you, in the early days when you were working for the neighbors, what would you write?
That's a good question.
Typically would you?
My first story I ever wrote was about kindergartners finger painting. I mean, literally, you had to write 15 stories a week, so you wrote everything you could get your hands on.
How long would these be?
Oh, yeah, a typical story would be, 450 to 550 words. Not real long ones. They were not interested in long, in-depth features. They figured the Atlanta Journal-Constitution could handle that. What we're interested in is all the fun little community news.
Okay.
And so you had to churn out 5 stories a day. I remember once when our secondary reporter, because we had 2 reporters at each office, was out. We had a vacancy in between positions. I did 27 stories one week. And I got in trouble for not clocking in for a city council meeting because it would have put me overtime. And I didn't want to get in trouble for having overtime. So I just didn't clock in. Little did I know they'd see the story and go, wait a minute.
So your first story was kindergarten finger painting.
Yep. And back then, you know, when you make $3.35 an hour, if the Rotary Club invites you, you come because that means there's a lunch involved.
Yeah.
So Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis Club, chamber meetings, man, I was all about any meeting where there was a meal. So you could count on me to be there.
How'd you get tied up into being part of the Rotary Club?
Well, when I first became an editor was in Sebring. And their Rotary Club in town was not their primary club, the Kiwanis was. And a fellow who wrote for the paper happened to be a Kiwanian and introduced me, and I started going, and I loved it. It was just, I've always felt like if you receive, then you have to give in return, right? So I feel like I've been blessed, not just with I think, a good life, but a good job. And just like I tithe to God with my finances and my time, I want to also tithe to my community. So I've always felt like I needed to give back something. And part of that's through church, but then I want to do it in other ways too. And starting with the Kiwanis, and then when I moved to Lake City, they didn't have a Kiwanis club. They just had a Rotary Club. And that club was fantastic. It was so engaging every week that you couldn't help but want to be there and not miss a meeting. One of the famous meetings that they talked about for years was a group of Polynesian dancers who came in and during lunch, and they went from table to table. And I'm not a dancer, so I was like shrinking under the table. A little bit, I know my boss is behind me going,
Okay.
Thankfully, it ended quickly.
So I'm assuming that Kiwanis and Rotary are
Very similar.
very similar.
Rotary is certainly the bigger organization. And over the years, I guess it was known, we were pretty well known for having a lot of more of the white collar folks in town. But now there's a lot of blue collar folks with us too. And we certainly want, everybody's welcome. That's the beauty of Rotary is we leave our things like your political registration at the door. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about that in there. We talk about what we have in common and what we can do that's good. So we really try to avoid, there's the kind of arguments and debates that people get divided over.
Okay. And you meet weekly?
Yep, we do. We meet at noon at Mariliano's in Murphy in their little meeting room onto the side. And heck, if anybody's interested, you can come with me.
Okay. So 2003, that's when you came to the Scout?
Yep. Yeah, I went back to Florence in 2001, and I honestly thought I'd be there for a while. My mom moved there, my aunt moved there, my uncle later moved there, so it was sort of like becoming a family hub, I guess. But when this position opened up, it was really hard to say no. What happened when I was at the Lake City paper, which was owned by the New York Times Company, they decided to sell a few of their papers in 2000. 5 different companies came to Lake City and made a pitch, and one of them was Community Newspapers Incorporated. What I remember the most is the first 4 people who came in, I gave the editorial talk. Our advertising director would talk, our circulation director, and then the financial guy, of course, would give the important stuff. First 4 people did not have a question for me, did not care about the news, did not want to know anything about it, couldn't wait to get to the numbers.
Yeah.
When C&I came and I was finished, they asked questions. They wanted to know how the people thought about the newspaper. What do the local officials feel about it? You know, what are your ongoing, concerns in the community? And they also, as each of us finished, gave a nice applause. And I know that seems odd, but after going through these meetings where you felt like you were literally giving a presentation to try to keep your job, to just have somebody say, nice presentation, meant all the difference. Thankfully, C&I did end up purchasing those papers. And I was there for another year before the publisher who was in Lake City ended up in Florence, and he hired me back, basically. And it was one of those, you can't say no to the salary that they were offering at the time. But I told Dink Neesmith, who's one of our co-owners of the company at the time, I said, if that Murphy, North Carolina position ever becomes available, I said, keep me in mind. Well, sure enough, a couple years later, Weaver decided to retire early. I think he was 59 and a half at the time. And they gave me the call, and even though it was not a race to come here, I still couldn't say no, because this feels like home. My buddy Dean Williams owns a music and art store in downtown Andrews, and so every year since high school, I've always been back. There's never been a time the calendar turned where I was not in Cherokee County. Typically with him and Andrews, that was when you just go to Walmart because that's where you'd see everybody.
Yeah.
So eventually it's like, we'll go hang out there for a while and I'll see all my old friends from school. But yeah, this place just grows on you, and once it gets a hold of you, it doesn't let go. And I can't imagine being anywhere else, honestly.
Do you feel like the area is more or less receptive to news than a larger metropolitan area?
I think everyone is obviously receptive to news. The difference is, from when I started, we used to have great conversations with people who disagreed with you. I'll tell you this, when I first started here, there was a fella out of Martins Creek named Josh Conklin. Strong Republican, very conservative guy. And one day I wrote something he wasn't sure about, and he just gave me a call. And he was kind of, he was a little agitated because he thought I meant one thing. And once I shared with him I didn't, we started talking. And the more we talked, the more we realized how much we had in common.
Yeah.
And so about every 3 months for several years, he'd give me a call, typically about something that was in the paper, as just a starter for the conversation. There was never any yelling. There was never any anger. There was never any, you're so dumb. I mean, none of that kind of stuff. It was all like, okay, that's interesting. Have you thought about this? Mm-hmm. And I miss that. My friend Hugh Williamson, who passed away a couple years ago, I had that relationship with him where we could talk about anything. And at the end of the day, we realized we have so much more in common than we don't. Arguing about the things that separate us is just a waste of valuable time and energy. And today, unfortunately, with the accessibility of social media and the ability to sort of hide behind your keyboard, people have no compunction whatsoever about being incredibly mean in a way that they would probably never do face to face.
Right. Yeah, you can get on many groups on Facebook and become very agitated reading the comments.
Yes.
I've read a few of the Cherokee Scouts comments boards, and there's some angry people, especially about the Bigfoot.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. Because to me, Bigfoot well, first of all, he's not real. He's mythical. So doing something fun with a mythological creature sounded like it was neat, but wow, some people really seem to take it personally. But what I found out in digging down, drilling down with some of those folks is it's not necessarily Bigfoot, it's just the change. So many people want to keep that Norman Rockwell essence of what they grew up with, and so they're very wary and resistant to something that might change that. You felt the same thing with the roundabout.
Oh yeah, the roundabout.
Even though we had a roundabout here for 50 years before it changed to the light, that change...
Was there one previously?
Oh yeah, it was up until the late 60s, early 70s.
I didn't know
when
that.
they finally got the light in.
I didn't know that.
So yeah, it was a big deal. In fact, I want to think it was even later than that, because the bull moose pen, which is now at the library, was in the middle of town. And high school kids, actually had water in the fountain. They would put dish detergent in there to make it bubble up.
Oh, yeah.
So typical thing to do when you're cruising on Friday and Saturday nights back in the day.
So they had a roundabout.
Yep.
Then they went to the light.
Went to the lights.
And now they've went back.
Back to the future. Yes,
I'm very
indeed.
receptive to the new roundabout.
I
like it.
wasn't sure how I'd feel, but I haven't had a single problem with it.
I really like it.
Yeah.
It's so much quicker.
I hated getting stuck where there was no turn on red.
Yeah.
Those were the lights that killed me.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one. You couldn't turn right on red. But I think if everybody treats everybody with respect at the roundabout, it's so much quicker.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've only seen a couple people do a wrong turn. Turn left.
I did see that one time.
So thankfully, but before the roundabout, a lot of people don't remember, we were having a wreck downtown almost every month. because people tended to go through that intersection. You see the yellow light, you speed up, you don't slow down, and as a result, they were clipping people turning. I think there's maybe been one mild fender bender since the roundabout. I mean, that's pretty good for several months now.
The gentleman you were talking about earlier, Mr. Conklin, is he still around?
Josh passed away, unfortunately, but I still have a crew of other people that I talk to. Part of, I think, being a publisher is making sure you don't just listen to yourself and you're not just listening to your staff. So for years, we had a public advisory group that came in on a weekly or a monthly basis of 6 different people, all different folks who were born here, folks who moved here, folks who are more progressive, folks who are more conservative. Male, female. So we wanted a nice group, and out of them, I'm still very close with a couple of the folks, and I talk with them all the time about where we are and what we're doing, and more importantly, how we can do it better. I've yet to see the world's perfect newspaper, so it can always be better. And most people think that we might be concerned about the internet, and I'm not at all. How somebody reads the news doesn't bother me at all. I read it in print, and I also read some publications online, and it's too easy to read it online. So you're going to see, as time goes on, more and more of our readers shift to online from print, and that's okay. We'll do something different in print to evolve with it, and ultimately being able to get online more will be able to get us to put the news out on a more timely basis. I look forward to the day when we have an active website, so we act more like a daily paper, where if something happens today, we're not waiting till Wednesday to report it. We can report it right then and there.
Do you see print as something that's viable, foreseeable future?
For now. There's certainly going to come a time when it just doesn't make sense. I mean, the prices of newsprint have gone up dramatically.
What's affected that?
Well, it started with COVID. And then overall, just because so many of the bigger, huge newspapers are now only 3 days a week and putting most of their energies online, like all the papers in Alabama, for instance. There's not a 7-day newspaper left, I think. They're all either 3 or 5 days, and the papers aren't as thick. So if you're using half as much newsprint, a couple of newsprint mills ended up shutting down, and as a result, we get ours from Mississippi, but a lot of folks get them from Canada, and they were having to worry about tariffs and things like that recently. So everything in the world ends up affecting overall our expenses, and that's part of what makes online so attractive, is you don't have the expense of paper or ink or postage. And right now postage just went up, so that's yet another expense we're having to take on.
And that's taken away something that could potentially go wrong. You're depending on someone to print it, whereas if you're online, then it's much easier.
That's a great point. I like that, and I never want to be the person who gets it first at the expense of getting it right. So we are often not the first to post something online because we're not going to post it unless we feel good about it. For example, there was the horrible shooting on June 30th. Well, in the immediate aftermath of that, there were just one rumor after another, and the internet was going wild, and we did not post anything because we could not confirm it. I mean, all the officers were engaged. We couldn't expect them to stop and explain it to us at the time. So once we, had the full story, then we went out and put it. It's not important. If you get it first, but you get it wrong, then you've blown it. So I would rather be second and get it right.
How do you decide as a business what to post online and what to leave in the paper?
Well, right now, overwhelming amount of our business comes from the print edition. So the web is basically for subscribers. And every week we make a few stories free for people who aren't subscribers. It's kind of like teasers to hopefully get them to think about it. So it's the same stories go on. What the question would be like the midweek thing. For instance, if something happens on Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday, we're more apt to put up a free story, particularly if it's something that is noticeable to the public.
Okay.
If something happens in a private home or something, it can wait until the next week. But if there's something that backed up traffic on the 4-lane, people want to know about it. Lord forbid, if there's somebody, an active person who's wanted, a fugitive, they need to know right away and things like that. So obviously, if the public safety is at stake, weather conditions, things like that, we post it right away for free. We're not interested in anything but making sure that people are safe. When it comes to your feature stories and things like that, those typically see print first before they find their way online.
How does it work as a business? How do you decide what is front page news?
That's a good question. Randy Foster, our editor, has a phrase he likes to use, interesting, informative, and useful. That all stories should have at least one of the three. If they have two of them, it's an even better story. If it has all three, then you've hit it out of the park. So you're looking for stories that have the broadest amount of impact. For instance, the last few weeks, it was pretty easy because in the unfortunate aftermath of Officer Flate's shooting, that was the story. That's what we're talking about. So that was above the fold, front and center every week, as he deserved. On a normal week like the issue that just came out today, we didn't have like a big, centerpiece, one big thing. So instead we have, what you're looking for on the top of the page are things that would attract people in the box. So the road rage shooting where this fella tried to escape by boat is just the right amount of crime, but thankfully nobody got hurt, but it's also got this weird thing in it about his escape. So it checks all the boxes that'd be interesting. And then also on the front page, we have a story about the counties pushing to privatize or get back the land around Lake Hiwassee.
Okay.
Much like Bigfoot in the Roundabout, there's enough conversation online about that to fill up a novel. And so that's a huge story and a huge thing going forward. One of the commissioners held a Zoom meeting last night to talk about it, which I commend him for because, we need to hear the voice of the people. And it's, a lot of folks like to say, the government or TVA owns that land. Well, it's public land. We are all actively participants and owners of that. And once you lose it, you can't get it back. So there's some things that we should keep natural so our future generations can enjoy them too.
I agree. I'm sure there was a lot of conversation regarding timber harvesting as well on the Forest Service.
Sure. And that's probably going to get even more so in the future, which can be a good thing because our forests haven't been necessarily managed as tightly as they used to be. So in the case of a fire, there's a lot more fuel for the fire. Mm-hmm. So maybe if they go through and clear it correctly and thin the forest, it could be a real positive for us. Now, if they go in clear cut, then I don't see a positive in it.
Yeah, there's a balance, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely.
So sometimes when I read column headings in a newspaper, I wonder, why did they use those words?
You're not the only one.
Do you just try to compress the story into a certain amount of words, 10 or less, or 8 or less?
A typical headline, if you have it across all 6 columns, you've got no more than 6 words.
Yeah.
So if you go multiple deck, you could squeeze a 7th or an 8th. Plus, you have to make the headline fit. You can't just write the best headline in the world and it be a little 12-point headline because nobody's going to see it. So you have to have the right size, it has to fit, and it has to make sense. So a lot of times, especially with really complex stories, it's tough to write a headline. So you've seen us more and more use what I call drop heads. So you'll have the main head in bold, and then you'll have a smaller head in a lighter font. And that's because we want to make sure that we get additional information before you start the story.
Okay.
Because if you've got a headline with 4 or 5 words, and you're talking about TVA bringing in new lines for additional power needs in the future, that's not something you can summarize in that. So that's why we use the drop heads, but you also use little boxes of info boxes to share that. Anything that makes it easier to digest the story, I guess.
So, with the recent shooting, how does it feel? I know that you want to report the news, but is there a feeling of sadness to have to cover something like that? I'm sure.
My God, yes. I can't stand it.
But you have to.
That's exactly right. We came very close to being right there on the scene because Appalachian Health Services was having a grand opening at 2 o'clock, and so we were on the way there when the shooting happened. If we had been there early, it would have been right there. When you first realize that a officer has been lost, and then I went back in the files and realized it had been 72 years since that had happened here. It makes you realize just how important it is. But we didn't want to lose sight of the fact that this man was not just a transport correctional officer. He was a human being. He had a wife, he had a family, and they loved him, and they're not going to get him back. So all of that was far more important to me than just covering the event, particularly since they caught the guy. And so we didn't have a fugitive situation. Mm-hmm. So we tried to anchor our coverage over the last few weeks to where we talked about the news of what's happening, but we also made sure to talk about him and his family and what they're going through and how people are helping. You saw our community, I think, at their best. That whole route for the funeral procession was, I can't imagine what it would have been like to be family, but wow. And the fact that we had basically the Haywood County Sheriff's Office just set up shop down here for a week to help us out so that our officers could take part in those things, could get counseling if they needed it. There's a brotherhood in law enforcement that I'm glad you saw, but we also saw our community really support and show how much we support law enforcement.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
was
It was
nice
very
to see.
nice,
Yeah.
especially with the flag they had
Yeah.
suspended above the road.
Yeah, it's a shame that it often takes tragedy to bring us together. I wish good news would do that.
Yeah. The one more question about the Scout.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to someone that wants to be in this, wants to write, or wants to be involved in the paper? Is that something that is that a lofty goal? Is that someone can do full time? Can they make a living?
Sure. Here in our staff, Randy's our editor, and Cannon Crompton is our sports editor. Christy Guthrie is our primary layout person. I typically do the front page, but she does just about every other page with sports. And then Charlene Kephart is our community editor, so she typesets most of the news. So all of us are all full-time folks engaged every day in the paper and very much a part of the production process. But we also have several folks who are staff correspondents, and those are basically freelancers, folks who they don't work in the office, but we pay them on a story-by-story basis. Every single one who's doing that for us is somebody who had never done it before. In one case, Angie, who's just fantastic, she came in and said she thought she was pretty funny and wanted to write a humor column. And so I asked her to write up an example. 99% of the times when you ask people to write up something and bring it back to you, you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
She was back in 3 days with something that made me laugh out loud. So for a couple of years, she wrote that, and then one day she came in and said, I'd really like to try writing some other things. And even though she'd never done it before, she was so good at the one, I was more than happy to help train her on the other. And now she just won an award for her photography, and she could barely take a photo when she first was with us. Her husband would take most of her photos when she was on assignment. So to see her grow into that is fantastic. Nicole Wright, who's our staff correspondent in Andrews, she just happened to meet Randy because she bought his car.
Okay.
And they were talking about, I'm the editor of the newspaper. You know what? I thought about doing some writing. He's like, call this David guy. And sure enough, she did. And 2 years later, she's thankfully still with us. So it's a blessing when you have members of the community who can join you and become partners in presenting the news. Because a couple of people can't do it. You've got to have several people out there. And that's what we got right now, thankfully.
I know a guy who emailed you even. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's multiple ways to get in contact
That's
with
right.
you.
Yep.
You were part of Mountain View Church.
Mm-hmm.
So has religion or spirituality always been something in your life? Is that something that you came to?
When I was growing up, my mother and stepfathers were not particularly church-going type folks. They weren't anti-God by any means, but they just didn't go to services. So I'd visit my grandfather at Wag Memorial Methodist all the time, and vacation Bible schools and things like that. And so I always had a great image of God in my mind. And probably because I'd never got to know my biological father, I've always the idea of having a father in heaven has always been very appealing to me. As I got older, I realized that everything I am, everything I will be, everything I could be is all wrapped up into my relationship with God. I mean, if you don't remember anything else from watching this interview, remember that God is important. And when I turn more of myself over to Him, I find myself in a lot happier situation. We make the mistake often of just trying to do too much ourselves. Whether it's ego or a desire, we just got to figure out how to do it. But God, thankfully, has shown me there's a better way, and I couldn't be more grateful. So the folks at Mountain View have been fantastic. I've been blessed to go on a lot of mission trips over the years and meet some different people. I never got to leave the country, which is unfortunate, but when you go to different places like Virginia Beach, which I went with a group from our church, and we were repairing homes of folks who were very low income, and they their roofs were falling apart, stairs were falling in. To be able to do things like that is so much more meaningful even than when you do something on your own and make a lot of money doing it, because you've given of yourself. And I think that's all God expects of us, to be the best version of yourself. And in doing so, give back to some other people. So hopefully I'm able to do that in my personal life and even in my professional life too.
So these mission trips, you've been on multiple in the country?
Yep.
Virginia?
A lot of times playing with the band from Mountain View, which was great. When I was at IBC, we went on trips all around the country. So I've been to Cleveland. Back in Cleveland was fantastic because myself and one other kid from the college were the only white people I saw all week. And so spending a week in a household with a couple of older retired African Americans in Cleveland, Ohio, was a whole different experience. The services were so dramatically different. The excitement level and the interaction with the audience was nothing like I'd experienced in a predominantly white church in the South. So that week changed me, because after then, I wasn't afraid to say amen or clap my hands or do anything like that.
So you'd go back?
Oh, my Lord, yes.
Yeah.
I'd go back every day of the week. That was, not only that, but the food was fantastic the whole week, just dynamite.
So that was on a band trip?
That was at IBC. We'd go twice a year. We'd go out. So, we did a lot of knocking on doors, cold knocking in those trips.
Okay, so this was just door-to-door ministry?
Yeah, typically the churches would be having like a revival or a gospel meeting or something, and then we'd go out during the week as students and invite people, and if folks wanted to study, then we'd study with them. Fortunate we would have, some folks have a relationship with the Lord by the end of the week. Some folks would get baptized, but we all learned something, not just about God, but about our fellow man. And you'd be surprised how many people are sitting behind a door desperate for somebody to talk to them.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't forgotten that. There's a lot of lonely people in the world.
Is Mountain View, is it non-denominational?
Yep, independent, which I kind of prefer that. A lot of churches have to worry about what their overhead organizations are going to do and things like that, and we don't have to worry about that. So we control what we believe and why we believe it, And everything we do is very strictly based on the Bible, as it should be.
All right. Well, in closing, I always like to ask everybody what you would like to say just to the audience, anybody, any advice.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say my family is the most important thing to me. I'm married. I have 4 children. My oldest, my son, unfortunately, I lost him a couple years ago. But my girls have given me 4 grandbabies now, and they are the light of my life. So if I'm not at work and I'm not at church, I've probably got a grandkid under one of my arms. And you know, if I could spend the rest of my life just being a full-time granddaddy, then I probably would do it. But in the meantime, since I can, I'll probably be kicking around the newspaper for a good while more.
Yeah. Okay, well, good. I really appreciate you sitting down with me.
My pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. Anytime.
I like to learn all I can about people.
And do know, if you ever have any questions about the Cherokee Scout, please call 828-837-5122 or email dbrown@cherokeescout.com. I promise to get back to you, even if it's not right away. But don't just assume what the answer is or take somebody else's word for it. If I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody who does.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Jesse. Good talking to you.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Woohoo!